the end of it. And I'm going to dive right in because we are super late and I'm so sorry. All right, so I'm going to define self-sabotage. I have been doing a lot of research, like biblically and over the internet and through my school website where I have a library of resources, and I'm really excited to share all of this information with y'all. It's going to be a little bit long, but I'm going to try to move through it quickly. So self-sabotage refers to the subconscious or conscious actions, behaviors, or thought patterns that hinder our progress, well-being, or success. It's basically getting in our own way. And we do that, it prevents us from achieving our goals, and sometimes it causes us to repeat harmful behaviors and make harmful choices over and over again, but we do it subconsciously. It was learned a long time ago. So how self-sabotage affects our lives. It can be seen as a defense mechanism. It's what our brain is trying to do. Our brain wants to keep us safe. The inner child within us wants to keep us safe, and that's its goal because it wants to keep us alive. We especially those who are who have trauma or complex trauma. We are like almost in survival mode the majority of our lives. It often arises from unresolved emotional wounds, fears, and limiting beliefs from the past, or I was just telling someone earlier that we latch on to those negative things, and it's like we throw out the positive things that anybody has ever said to us. We latch on to the negatives for some reason. So now we're going to talk about recognizing the self-sabotaging behaviors, because you're not, some of these we do unconsciously, like I said a little bit ago. We do them and we don't think too much about them, or we joke about them, and it doesn't, we don't think that it hinders us, but in the end they usually do. So we learned these in childhood. These are childhood coping mechanisms that are no longer serving us. Whenever we self-sabotage, most of these, as you'll see here in just a minute, they're coming from our childhood. We learned these behaviors and we learned these coping mechanisms so that we could be seen, heard, validated, loved, appreciated. We learned all of these whenever we were little. And so as an adult, they're not serving us anymore. So to make you aware of them, I think would be pretty beneficial. I was actually surprised by a bunch of them that I saw. So the first one is procrastination. I am like queen procrastinator, and I'm late for everything because I call myself a overachieving procrastinator. So like I will wait until the last minute, but I'll do everything in like a perfectionist way, if that makes sense. So I'll wait, like for my homework, for example, especially where I've been really busy with like building the business and stuff. I wait, so everything is due on Sundays. So I will have an essay and a presentation due on Sunday night, and I will wait until Sunday around 5 to do all of my homework and try to get it done by like midnight, right? And that is detrimental to my time. It makes me anxious, but I keep putting it off. So that so many people procrastinate as a form of self-sabotage, delaying tasks or responsibilities out of fear of failure or inadequacy. It stems from past trauma experiences that instilled a fear of judgment or criticism. Another one is avoiding intimacy, and I think this is like one of the biggest things with self-sabotage too, because so we put up a shield from emotional vulnerability. We don't want to be vulnerable. We've been hurt before, and so our brain tells us, if you want to be safe, you need to put a wall up, right? You feel somebody getting, we'll get into that here in a minute. Hang on. So women who have experienced trauma may subconsciously avoid intimate relationships or being vulnerable to protect themselves from potential pain. This avoidance can sabotage the possibility of healthy connections. And so a lot of us, so we always hear that, like I push people away, right? And we push people away because we don't want to, we don't want to feel pain. We'd rather just like be prepared and not get into a relationship where we're going to get hurt. However, what I'm finding is that we try to prevent pain in the possibility of a healthy relationship, but turn to painful relationships to prevent pain. Like, are you seeing where I'm going with that? Like, we turn to painful relationships to prevent the possibility of pain in a healthy relationship. And I was like, I totally can understand like where that happens at, or why that happens, but at the same time, it's funny how our brain works, because we go to what's comfortable. But like I said, we'll get to that here in just a second. So, and the other one, another behavior is, or coping mechanism is imposter syndrome. And that's like feeling like an imposter or unworthy of success. That's a common self-sabotaging thought pattern. Trauma survivors might struggle with feelings of not deserving success because we have low self-esteem rooted in past experiences and trauma. So because you've been told so many times that you aren't worthy, you aren't enough, you aren't good enough, you are never going to make it, you're never going to be able to do this, or you are, look at who you were, look at what you've done. You have like internalized that. And let me just say that whenever I was on drugs, I could convince myself that I was dope sick. Like whenever, if anybody's in here and doesn't know, whenever you're on drugs, you, if you don't have them, then you become sick. And so I wouldn't be sick at all, but I could tell myself that I was sick, and my brain would tell my body, and I would start freaking out, and I would start having withdrawal symptoms, even though I wouldn't be, I would just have done something, right? So that the reason why I say that is because we can think ourselves sick. We can think ourselves into believing that something is true, and our body will internalize that, and we will act accordingly. It believes what you tell it, is what I'm saying. So, and then negative self-talk is another one. So it's self-sabotage manifests through negative self-talk, where we continuously criticize ourselves. We undermine our confidence, we undermine our self-worth, and trauma just multiplies the negative view of ourselves. So a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. And that's in the Bible. It's biblical. That's scripture. What we think about ourselves, what we tell ourselves, all of this self-sabotage of what we keep saying to ourselves, we believe it over and over again. And I know I'm talking about all this like negative stuff right now, but at the end of it, I'm going to help you. I'm going to tell you how we can like overcome it. I'm not just going to be talking about the bad things. I'm just trying to make you aware of these certain old coping mechanisms. Perfectionism. We set unattainable standards. I talked about that one last week. We develop perfectionistic tendencies, setting impossibly high standards for ourselves. When we can't meet those standards, we reinforce the feelings of failure and self-sabotage. So I think that kind of goes, that just like, I feel like that talks for itself. Whenever we it's like we're setting ourselves up for failure, but we want everything to be perfect. Everything just, self-sabotage just like goes against everything. So we want everything to be perfect because we want to grab a sense of self-worth in the perfectionism, but whenever we can't get it perfect and we can't do everything right and we can't achieve this impossible goal that nobody has ever really set before, then we beat ourselves up about it. Okay, another one is self-isolation, avoiding connection and support. Whenever we were younger, we most likely, anytime we tried to turn to our parents, they were just like, okay, I don't care, suck it up, go on about your day. And so that's how we've learned to cope with things. We just isolate because it's easier than trying to go and talk to somebody and be vulnerable with our feelings, because we fear that we're just going to be rejected and shut down anyways. Whenever, most of the time, if you have a good support system, they're not going to do that. But we would rather stay to ourselves than try to put ourselves out there and feel rejected in the first place. But like I said, it's going against everything. It's like, because whenever you isolate, you feel just as bad, right? You are rejecting yourself. And oh, y'all, I have something. Oh, I can't wait. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So, substance abuse we will numb the emotional pain. That's another coping mechanism. Self-criticism, engaging in relentless self-criticism and negative self-talk that erodes our self-esteem and confidence. We can be narcissistic to ourselves. We can literally demean ourselves and talk down to ourselves as if, but if somebody else were to talk to us that way, or if we saw somebody else talking to one of our children that way, we would go off, right? But talking to ourselves that way, we think that it's okay because we're so used to it. It's comfortable. Not comfortable, but you know what I mean. It's normal to us. Overthinking is another self-sabotaging behavior. Dwelling excessively on past mistakes, future worries, hypothetical scenarios, leading to decision paralysis out of fear. Constantly replaying a conversation and saying, going over oh, well, I should have said this, or I should have done that, and just overthinking everything constantly and questioning yourself. You are sabotaging yourself whenever you overthink so much. Impulsivity, making hasty decisions without considering the consequences. Lack of self-care, neglecting physical and emotional well-being, insufficient sleep, avoidance of challenges, refusing to step out of our comfort zone, or avoiding situations that require growth. I think that one's really powerful, because we have the opportunity to change, but some people would rather sit and complain and point the finger and blame than they would to work on themselves, because it's so much easier to sit and point the finger and blame than it is to actually grow and work on yourself. I am so proud of the ladies that are in my beta program, because they, out of courage, they said, okay, I need help. And it's not that I'm not proud of everybody else. If you're in here and you are in the beta, I'm in the beta program, I'm so proud of you as well. You might not have as much going on. However, these ladies do have a lot going on, and they, instead of sitting and blaming, blame shifting, and just it's like a pig wallowing in his mud. Right? You don't wallow in it, you reach out for help. But some people don't know how to do that. It's really difficult. Some people don't know how to ask for help, because whenever they did ask for help, they got shut down, like I said earlier. Okay, so relational self-sabotage behaviors are, so push-pull dynamics. We create an emotional push-pull within relationships by going back and forth between I really, really want you and I really want you to be close, and distancing yourself, right? Jealousy and insecurity, constantly feeling threatened by real or perceived competitors, can strain relationships. Constantly thinking that they are cheating, and you sabotage yourself, you sabotage that relationship, but it's out of fear. Like I said, underneath almost every negative emotion, that's my theory anyways, is that underneath almost every negative emotion is fear. Passive aggressiveness, excessive dependence, invalidation, dishonesty. So now I'm going to get into the really cool stuff. So I've been looking into shadow work, but I have been looking at like the biblical side of it, and I find it extremely interesting. And all shadow work is, they put like a spiritual, they put like a spiritual mask, like a new age type deal on it, like the third eye and stuff. But if you really think about it, all it is an inner conflict. And that's what I believe self-sabotaging is. It's just a constant inner conflict. So what I found in the Bible about this is, in a biblical context, the concept of finding one's hidden self or addressing the shadow can be related to the story of Peter. And what I found was that he was often represented as he was a representation of human imperfection and the inner struggle between our ego and who we are in Christ. So our old self and our new creation are constantly battling each other. And whenever you come out of trauma and you are and you're in Christ, you still, everybody here, or everybody on earth, anybody who has been saved, who has changed their life and given their life over to Christ, we all have that old self. And it still lives in us. But it's a constant inner conflict. Let's see. In the New Testament, Peter is known for his moments of doubt, fear, and self-sabotage. So when he walked on water with Jesus, his doubt caused him to sink. Another instance in his denial of Jesus was whenever he denied Jesus 3 times before the crucifixion. These actions represent moments when Peter's inner conflict, like fear and insecurity, they took over. So self-sabotage can be seen. Here's my thoughts. I believe that one aspect of self-sabotage is self-rejection. When we engage in self-sabotaging behaviors or thoughts, we are in a way rejecting our own potential for success, happiness, and personal growth. We undermine our own efforts, which are driven by our inner conflicts, our limiting beliefs, and unresolved emotions. Our fear of rejection affects so much already as it is. And I think that we reject ourselves and we reject the things that we want because we don't believe that we are worthy. I think that we reject love, true love, and actually letting people in. And I feel like self-sabotage is a form of self-rejection. So in the case of Peter, his denial of Jesus can be interpreted as a moment of self-rejection. He denied his connection to Jesus out of fear and insecurity and fear that he was going to lose his, why did he do that? He rejected Jesus in front of everybody because he wanted to maintain his image. And we do that a lot. We put on a show and we try to make sure that everybody thinks that we're fine, because whenever we actually do reach out and we actually do pour out our feelings, we would just rather not. We would rather deal with it ourselves. We've tried to become dependent on ourselves because that's what we know is comfortable, and we know that we can rely on ourselves or God, right? I mean, we might go to God, but God did not intend for man to be alone. He did not intend for us to deal with things by ourselves. In the Bible, in Genesis, God said, "Let me make a helper for this man, because it is not good for man to be alone." That's God's words. It's not good for us to be alone. So, anyways, going a little off track. Okay. So self-sabotage often arises from inner conflicts and a lack of self-acceptance as well. And so the biblical shadow work, the aspect that I was talking about, the self-rejection, Romans 7 says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. But if I know that what I'm doing is wrong, this shows that I agree that the law and God and the new version of myself is good. So I am not the one doing wrong. It is sin living in me that does it. And I found that just to be really interesting. Whenever I first got sober, I read that verse and I was like, wow, I'm not the only one who has struggled with this. I'm not the only one who went back and forth knowing that I was sabotaging myself, going back and forth, doing something that was wrong over and over and over again. And I felt really bad about it. But we do little things like that all the time, and we don't even recognize it. So if you're a science kind of person, I actually went... I found a few things that have to do with the brain and how self-sabotage works in the brain. So the brain's response to self-sabotage, it triggers stress responses in the brain. So whenever you talk down to yourself, whenever you reject yourself, you reject something that you truly want. Because, in relationships, I find it funny. Whenever I, before I met my husband, I would push people away, but I would only push them away because I knew that I was deep down clingy and I really wanted love, but I pushed them away because I'm like, if I'm too clingy with them, then they're going to leave me. And so we push them away even though we really want them close. That was that push-pull dynamic that I talked about a little bit ago. Okay, so anyways, it can trigger stress responses in the brain, releasing cortisol, the hormone cortisol. This creates a cycle where self-sabotaging behaviors become a way of coping with stress, even though they multiply the problem in the long run. The stress response is natural. It's a natural and adaptive mechanism Cortisol is designed to prepare the body to handle perceived threats or challenges. So I want y'all to just really think about that for just a second. Just take 1 second and think that whenever you talk down to yourself, or you are rejecting yourself of love or success or a healthy relationship out of fear, your brain responds to that as everything is a threat, and it goes into survival mode. So, for instance, someone might cope with let's see, I'm trying to think of something. So there's a really good relationship that, like a possible relationship that's there, but you push it away. You're going back and forth, and you're like, I'm just gonna push it away, because your brain, whenever you are rejecting and you are trying to project something onto that person that probably isn't, it might not even be real. You're just like trying to find and pick and nitpick on what somebody's bad things are about them. Your brain is going to automatically see that person as a threat, and it's like your brain is just shut off from that person regardless of if you really wanted to like them or not. I hope that makes sense. So another cool brain fact about self-sabotage is that it soothes our nervous system for trauma survivors. And let me explain why. So, creating familiarity and predictability. So self-sabotage, such as repeating negative behaviors or staying in unhealthy relationships, provides a temporary sense of familiarity and predictability. So our brain, it is soothing to our brain to be in a relationship with an unhealthy, abusive person, or to abuse ourselves, like mentally. It's because it's familiar and it's predictable, because our brain knows what to expect and it knows how to respond to that already. But the unknown is very scary. The unknown of what if, right? That is where all of this, I hope all of this is kind of tying together. But so trauma survivors are often sensitive to stress and unpredictability, find comfort in knowing what to expect, even if it's negative. And it briefly reduces anxiety. And this is all from a case study that I can show you guys. So even though we're already sensitive to stress and the unknown, because of our past, even if somebody doesn't have trauma, even if they just had a really tough childhood, it's comforting to know what to expect. And so whenever your whole childhood and maybe all of the relationships that you've been in up until now have been demeaning, have been abusive, have been, you've been talked down to, it's familiar. You know how to do that. Your brain's already wired for that. You already have all those connections of how to talk down to yourself. So why is it hard to rewire and make good or say good things about yourself? Why is that so hard? Because your brain has been wired your entire life to talk negative, and those roads are already worn in your brain. Those wires that are already connected. So it's really hard for someone to rewire, because it takes consistency. Getting out of self-sabotaging behaviors, I wish I had a one fix all for you all, but it takes work, and it's going to take time, because it depends on the length of your trauma, the length of how long you have been talked down to, and everyone who has talked down to you, it's going to depend, like how long it's going to take you is going to depend on those factors, because you're going to have to completely rewire the way that you talk to yourself. But we'll do an exercise here in just a little bit that will hopefully help you a little bit. So another is the reason why it soothes the nervous system for trauma survivors is perceived control and avoidance of triggers. So self-sabotage offers an illusion of control for those who may feel powerless due to trauma. Like that one hit me kind of hard, because my perfectionist tendencies are a form of control. Like I know that if I'm a perfectionist in my home, at least I do have control over what my home looks like. But it is an illusion of control. Self-sabotage, like So, for example, pushing away potential partners or avoiding situations related to past trauma can provide a false sense of control. It also helps individuals avoid triggers that remind them of their traumatic experiences, providing temporary relief from anxiety associated with these triggers. So, whenever, let's say that we all, so we're all powerless as it is already. But whenever we've been demeaned and talked down to, and we have had no sense of control, and we have been controlled our entire lives, either like indirectly or directly, just to have a sense of control over something and controlling, because if you put yourself out there, then you don't have control over what the reaction to that is going to be. If you start to get into a relationship and that relationship is you don't know what that's going to be, you know how to control the situation because you know that you can just avoid it, and then you would have a sense of control. The ball isn't in their court. So I hope that makes some sense. All right, so trying to think of how much time we have and what I have left to go through. So, oh yeah, we should be good. Okay, so just a couple roots of self-sabotage, child experiences, and their impact on like why it would be. So the reason why I want to share this with you all is because in order to know where we are going, in order to know why we do the things that we do, it's gonna have to go down to the root. Where you're gonna figure that out at is going to be the root. Why is this for me? I'm not gonna dig deep into these. I'm just gonna name them off. So if you can, I'm just gonna read off of this, and if you can relate to one, then just hold on to that and just remember that, like, okay, this is where one of my self-sabotaging behaviors comes from, and then that way you can try to work on that later on, or right now, you just be more aware of it. So if you are emotionally neglected, you might find it challenging to navigate relationships or cope with stress, and you resort to self-sabotage to manage the overwhelming feelings. Physical abuse relates to heightened stress responses when faced with tense situations as an adult. You might struggle to control intense emotions. Abandonment, if you were abandoned as a child, you might find it challenging to trust others fully. I think this is like, I think that self-sabotage is really like, so it's self-rejection, but it's also a lack of trust in self. Does that make sense? So we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust ourselves, and therefore we don't have any trust for others or ourselves. So we talk down to ourselves, and we allow other people to walk all over us like a doormat. And then we beat ourselves up for letting them do that. Right? So you see how it's just so conflicting? Like, self-sabotage is very, very conflicting. We're sabotaging ourselves, but it's also causing pain that we're trying to run from. And this is all because of all of this: the emotional neglect as a child, the physical abuse, the abandonment issues, the verbal abuse that you've experienced as a child, any kind of traumatic loss that you have endured, unmet needs as a child. You didn't receive unconditional love or acceptance, or emotional validation. You didn't receive safety or security. I think that one's probably the worst one, which leads to chronic anxiety, a need for control. You are scared for your life. You are constantly living in survival mode, and so you're constantly anxious. You're constantly trying to find a way to control anything and everything, not in a bad way, because I totally get it. All of this stuff, I'm not like you. Like, a lot of this stuff, I can totally identify with. So, anyways, you might self-sabotage to regain a sense of predictability when faced with unfamiliar or potentially threatening situations. So, a fear of rejection, so people pleasing, overcompensation, negative self-talk, avoidance of responsibility. Okay, so I'm going to talk about relationships really quick because I feel like a couple people really wanted to hear about that. So self-sabotage in relationships. If you're in one, if you are dating, or how you self-sabotaged in your previous relationship. So we seek safety in the familiar, like I talked about just a little bit ago. So when trauma shakes the foundation of, shakes the foundation of security. So the security is fallen from underneath of you. Individuals often seek refuge in what's known and familiar. The brain's reasoning is simple yet powerful. What's familiar feels less threatening. I talked about that just a little bit ago. So trauma survivors become masters at avoiding anything that even remotely resembles past traumas. So this includes sticking with familiar, unhealthy situations to dodge the risk of re-traumatization. It's like choosing the devil you know over the one that you don't. This avoidance meant to protect often keeps us shackled to patterns that perpetuate distress. It's the avoidance dance, like going back and forth with, we avoid what we, I just lost my train of thought. So we avoid the healthy relationship because we know what's already in this unhealthy, what kind of unhealthy looks like, and that's familiar to us. I feel like I'm being repetitive. Didn't I already talk about this? Oh, this is really good though. So trauma weaves intricate emotional webs that are hard to untangle. Disrupted emotional regulation skills make familiar seem stable, no matter if it's unstable or not. So this is kind of like what I was talking about a little bit ago. It creates a trauma bond. If I'm sure a couple of you know what trauma bond is, but it's where you really bond. Usually you bond with somebody who has caused trauma in your life, and you just like have a bond to them and you don't know how to let go. It's usually why domestic abuse survivors are like, I don't know why I stayed for so long. I wanted to leave, but I kept going back. That's also because of the narcissistic or the narcissist drama triangle. Like, you have the savior, they're going to come in, they're going to save the day, they're going to love you, they're going to love bomb you, they're going to give you everything that you want and make themselves seem like they are just like the best person in the entire world. And then the bully comes in and he completely like ruins your self-esteem. He finds any strength, any weakness that you have, and he demeans you and diminishes any self-worth or self-esteem that you had left, even though you came to him already broken. and you're down, he has bullied you and picked on you, and you're to the point where like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And then the magician comes in. So savior, bully, magician. So the magician comes in and he like waves his magic wand, and he tells you he knows how to fix this, and he promises that he knows how to make it better. He's going to make it better. It's all going to be perfect now. I promise. I love you. I'll do anything. A lot of people will be like, I'll kill myself. There's a lot of men who will do that, and then comes in the savior, and that just starts all over again. But anyways, that's familiar to us. We know what to expect. It's easier for us who have been in difficult relationships to ignore the red flags and bypass them, because even though we see them, we're like, it's okay. I know how to handle this. Like, I've been through this. Like, I've got this. I know how to handle, like, demeaning self-talk. I know how to keep my mouth shut and not say anything, because I've been through it for so long. So anyways, excuse me. Now let's talk about like the happy stuff. So let's talk about how to break the cycle. I just wanted to make y'all aware of everything. I hope that, that wasn't like too rough on you guys. I just, to make you aware of the behaviors, and, like awareness and acceptance is the first step. Where did it come from? What am I doing? What are the behaviors that I'm doing that I need to change, and things like that. And whatever I skipped over, I can give you guys the notes in, and you guys, I'll post it on here after I'm done, so that you can find which behaviors. That way you can apply it to how to break the cycle. So, recognizing that self-sabotage is an outdated coping mechanism. It no longer serves you. This coping mechanism that you learned as a child to not speak up, to just allow those voices to just continue and talk down to you, because of your past, because of your childhood, because of how either a relationship or your childhood, your inner child is hurting. So recognizing that is no longer a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism from your childhood that no longer serves you. Connecting self-sabotage behaviors to childhood, and we already did that. Acknowledging the need for change and growth. So here's one of the things that I really want y'all to know. We sabotage ourselves because we aren't comfortable in who our true self is. Because whenever we were younger or in a relationship, we tried to be ourselves. And whenever we were ourselves, we got shut down. And so we have learned that if I'm my authentic self, then I'm going to get shut down. And so you've formed this whole other person. And is that why you're sabotaging yourself? Because you know that it's not your true self and who God wants you to be and how God wants you to talk to yourself. So I really want you to, we've got to learn how to discover who we are in Christ. And it's like I said, it's going to be difficult because, we know that he created us in the womb, and we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we hear all these things, and he loves us no matter what, and we are forgiven, and he died on the cross for us, for you. He died on the cross for you. And to hear this over and over again, it almost it's like hard to conceptualize and to actually accept, if that makes sense. So hearing it over and over again is kind of hard to believe it after a while. But just getting into a very deep relationship with God and reading in the Bible. It doesn't even have to be about you or what He says about you. It doesn't have to be about that. The more that you're in God's Word, the more that you're praying, the more that you are like close to Him, the closer or the more that you're going to learn not to talk to yourself that way, because you're going to know whose you are. So having grace for yourself, trying to heal those old wounds, and knowing that if we do not break the cycle of how we talk to ourselves, our children watch us, and our children pay attention to how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves, how we are in like our relationships with others that we're close to. And they're going to take note of that and breaking the generational cycle of the talking down to you, because I can almost guarantee that your parents talked down to themselves. They got down on themselves. They were very harsh with themselves. And if they weren't, then maybe your grandparents were, or you didn't know that they were, right? So it's just like trying to break the cycle of constant negativity pouring into yourself, right? And so like I said, you can totally talk yourself, you can shame yourself to death. You can shame yourself, and you can talk down to yourself, and you can stay away, and you can put up a wall all you want, but the only one who's going to be able to break down that wall is God, and then you actually putting in the work to do that. So I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions. I just want you to think about it for a second. So take a minute to think about a self-sabotaging behavior that you often engage in. Whether that's something that you say to yourself or something that you do, one of the behaviors or the coping things that I talked about earlier. Can you trace it back to when you first started doing it? Consider the situations or experiences in your past where this behavior may have served as a coping mechanism, maybe in your childhood. Did it help you in that time? And I want you to imagine your younger self dealing with the same challenges that you are currently. What would you say to that younger version of yourself? I'm back and forth between if I wanted to take everybody in to meet their inner child, but it actually is a very like intense. It's really intense, and I said that I would last week, but the more I think about it, it's actually something that really needs to be done like one-on-one, or I would totally do it with everybody, but it can be very, very like draining. So okay, so where is my, hang on, I'm sorry. I'm almost out of time. Okay, so reflect on the moments of doubt, fear, and self-sabotage. Explore the underlying emotions and beliefs that drive those actions. Why am I talking to myself this way? Why am I pushing this person away? Why am I sabotaging this success? Why am I sabotaging something that could be good, potentially good? Or why do I think that I am not good enough? Why? And I also have another thing that I really, that I've been trying this week. Where is it? So anytime you go to say something very negative about yourself, because I believe that's probably like the most difficult one, like talking down to yourself and beating yourself up for past mistakes or something that you just did, or, well, that was stupid, you know. And whenever you do that, I want you to pause. Every time that you catch yourself, just try anyways, catch yourself saying it and stop and sit and put the word but in there. For example, earlier, I was looking, I'm trying to go from like organized hoarder to a minimalist. And so I was like, there's no way I can do this. Like, I can't do this. And then I remembered to say, but. So there's no way I can do this. And I was like, okay, but if I break it down into smaller pieces, right, I know that I can do this. Or there's no way, or I am not good enough, but I know that I am good enough in God's eyes, or I know that I am good enough in this area, or I know that I can be good enough. I know that what I'm doing is enough. I know that I'm giving it my all. Right? So just putting the word but in there and just see if that helps at all, because it's been helping me lately. So, healing from self-sabotage is a gradual process that requires self-awareness, self-compassion, and consistent effort. You're going to have to consistently catch yourself doing it. So it's going to be so for people who are just constantly in autopilot and just trying to like get by and in survival mode, this is very difficult to do, because you are so used to it's like a blur up here. You don't really know. You're not really aware of certain things until you think about it. That's why self-sabotage is a really unconscious action. So it's really going to be putting in the effort to be aware of how you talk to yourself, what you're pushing away, and why. You need to be asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why did I talk to myself that way? Where does that come from? So self-awareness is the first step, to recognize, acknowledge those behaviors, like I just told you a little bit ago, and your thought patterns. So Romans 12:2 says, what? Do not conform to the patterns of this world, because this world is the world that we are comparing ourselves to, and we believe that, like, we sabotage ourselves because we're seeing the outside world and we're seeing how other people are doing it, and we believe that we should be just as perfect as they are whenever they haven't been through what we've been through. And not only that, the world is like photoshopped. Like, what you see on social media is not real. What you see on, I was straight up with y'all and told y'all that my pictures that are on there are AI. Like, just little stuff like that. And I'm not perfect either, and I admit that to y'all. The world that we see and how we talk to ourselves, like, I'm never going to be able to do that. Okay, compared to who? And do you know that person you're comparing yourself to, do you know, it's a whole trap, like a comparison trap. Do you know that person's whole story, and if they really are, like, doing it exactly the way they should be? Or I hope that makes sense. So that's a whole nother subject, Mariah. Okay. Pay attention to moments where you're holding yourself back or engaging in negative self-talk. Whenever you stop yourself and you feel yourself put up a wall, just try to be aware of those. Another one is to identify your triggers. You need to figure out what causes me to shut down. What causes me to start talking negative to myself? What are my triggers? Write them down. If you are here, that means that, and you are watching this video, it's because you care and because you want to change yourself. I can't tell who's in here right now, but regardless, I love you. So write down those triggers that lead to self-sabotage or self-rejection, right? Let's see. Are there specific stressors or past experiences that contribute to those patterns? So write down the triggers and say, which this is all in here. So that if you can't remember this, then it's in here that I'm going to give you. Identify the triggers. Write down what they are. It's very important to write them down. And then, what are the specific stressors in your life or past experiences that cause these triggers to set you off, to shut you down? Why? That's what I'm saying. Like, why? Figure out the why. Why am I doing this? Where did it come from? Because if you can figure out where it comes from, you'll be like, oh, right, that makes sense. And that's not true about me, right? I talked just the other day, I just didn't feel like I was scared that I'm doing all of this for nothing and that I'm not good enough, that I'm not capable. And I was like, where does that come from? So I took a step back, and it was from my stepmom and my past relationships who told me that I wasn't enough. Okay, so is that really true? No, it's not. It's not true. I know who I am, and I know whose I am. And I know that those people were hurting really bad if they had to hurt an innocent child and a loving, caring woman, right? They had to be really broken themselves. And I was talking to, dang it, I wish I could find that. I just had it. I was talking to someone earlier, and narcissist, let me just tell you this, because this is really important, if I can find it. What is wrong with me? How do you lose something that was like just in front of you? Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so yeah, a narcissist or an insecure man or a narcissistic parent will feed on your pain in hopes to relieve some of theirs. And I want you to remember that. If something triggers you and you're like, yeah, well, and you're like, you write down your triggers, you figure out where it came from, and you go back to that person, they were feeding on your pain to relieve theirs, right? So just try to remember that. So, and the reason why that's significant is because it's not true. What you tell yourself has been told somewhere. It doesn't just come from nowhere. You have been told that indirectly or directly at some point in your life. So, identify the triggers, write them down. Try to work with a therapist or a counselor or a coach, especially if your self-sabotage is deeply rooted in past trauma and emotional wounds. Practice mindfulness, trying to be aware. I've showed you guys this before, and I know it looks really cheesy, but it's called the butterfly hug. And if you're ever like extremely stressed out, this is like a cognitive behavioral therapy technique that they teach children, and where I do biblical inner child healing. And because we are all I think it really helps everyone, but it helps to ground your brain and let your brain know, okay, I'm here, I'm now, and it connects both parts of your brain. So what you do is you go like this and you go like this, and then you just pat and you breathe, you alternate like this. And that's like one mindfulness technique. So and that helps. And so mindfulness isn't just like meditation and doing and breathing. It also is becoming more aware of your thoughts and your emotions in that exact moment. It reduces impulsive self-sabotaging behaviors. So if you can be aware of it and you can learn to reconnect those wirings like I talked about earlier and start doing it quicker, the quicker that you do it, the quicker you train your brain to start changing how you talk to yourself. And it's going to take practice, and it's going to take effort, and it's going to take time. I love each and every one of y'all, and I am still doing that to this day. It's a matter of catching yourself. We're so easy to catch on to somebody else's and be like, oh, like, especially if you're a parent, it's easy for you to be like, oh, hey, let's not do that, right? Or, well, don't talk to yourself that way. It's easy for us to talk to our kids and catch it immediately. But whenever it comes to ourselves, we'll just keep the cycle going, and we'll just keep talking to ourselves without catching ourselves at all. So trying to be mindful in the moment. Catch it as soon as you possibly can. Challenge those negative beliefs. Replace them with positive affirmations and realistic self-talk. Set realistic goals for yourself. That's a whole nother thing. Let's just not do that. Okay, so break down your goals into smaller, manageable steps. Avoid setting yourself up for failure with overly ambitious ambitious goals that can trigger self-sabotage. You know what you're capable of. Set realistic goals. You're only one person. You can only do everything that you can do. And if you're giving it your all and you're giving it your best, then that's good enough, right? It's good enough. As long as you're giving it your all and you're trying to follow through with the goals that you set, right? So we don't want to that's another trigger. So if that's one of your triggers, that you set up way too high of expectations for yourself, like myself, I told myself that I was going to clean the kitchen, I was going to declutter and minimalize the kitchen and the living room in one day, and like I'm on my third day, so that's just an example, a little one, but nonetheless. Self-compassion, this is going to take a really long time. So it doesn't have to, though. It could take a shorter amount of time. But being kind and compassionate towards yourself, understanding that self-sabotage often stems from a desire to protect you. So treat yourself with the same kindness that you would offer a friend. So protect it. Self-sabotage is just, it's trying to protect you already as it is. And I'm almost done, because I'm almost done. Just a couple, oh yes, we're almost done. Okay, so being kind to yourself, like I said, so self-sabotage is just there because it's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to, it thinks that it is anyways, because that's the coping mechanism of your childhood, right, that you've carried with you into adulthood. So be kind to yourself. Build a support system. Surround yourself with supportive friends and loved ones who can encourage and motivate you. So I know all of these might seem like build a support system, journal, seek personal growth, celebrate small wins, visualize your success, and stay patient and be persistent. Those are all really like, what's that called? Generalized things that I wrote down, and they are significant. But I think that the biggest, I really believe that the biggest thing of what self-sabotage is, it's a fear of failure. Like I said, underneath almost every negative emotion or behavior is fear. So self-sabotage is the fear of failure, the fear of ridicule, the fear of uncertainty, or the fear of success. So you're rejecting yourself. We fear rejection, we fear abandonment, but we are abandoning and rejecting ourselves whenever we sabotage ourselves. And we are allowing the person or the people who hurt us to still be in our mind. So I really think that like the best thing that we could all do is to write down our triggers and figure out exactly where they come from, and then put a better statement that, or a Bible verse that you can replace that with for as far as your thoughts go. But you know, it's really going to be catching yourself. And I cannot emphasize that enough. It's going to be catching yourself in those moments and saying, why am I doing this? And you're going to have to be mindful, and you're going to have to like try to be aware of whenever you do these things, right? So I think that's it. I hope that has helped y'all. Whatever I missed or may have skipped over, I'm gonna share with y'all in the thing, or in whenever I'm done with this. Next week, I actually have a guest speaker coming in. She's one of my friends, and she is a relationships coach. And she is super awesome. She's super cool. And we're going to be doing a poll on Monday to see what you guys want to talk about with her. I have my membership site built out, but all I have to do is plug in the information. So I am very excited. I'm just like scratching the surface here with these videos. But whenever I do my membership, I'm going to be going into like deep detail. We're going to go into deep healing type things. And I'm really, really excited about it. So, I feel like there was something else I had to tell y'all. So another note that I wrote down here is that we are through. My daughter's starting to be like, Mom. So one of the reasons why we self-sabotage, or like whenever we do self-sabotage, we are attempting to, I found this on Google. We are attempting to punish ourselves and atone for our own sins with self-condemnation. So I'm going to leave y'all with that. So just, we're trying to atone for our own sins with self-condemnation. And that one hit me really hard earlier. So, I hope that this was helpful. I can't wait to, watch my friend next week. And I'm kind of awkward at goodbyes. So I hope you guys have a really good weekend. I hope you have a really good night. I'm going to go play with the kids for a little while, and I will see y'all next time. Have a good night, y'all.